I was standing in the kitchen, absently stirring a pot on the stove, when I heard the soft click of the front door closing behind the rest of the family. A quiet sound that somehow echoed louder than it should have in the stillness of the house. For a moment, I just stood there, listening to the silence settle in. It was rare for the house to feel this empty, this undisturbed, especially on a weekend, but today was different. My mom and stepdad had left early, leaving just me and Ethan behind. He had insisted on staying home, claiming he needed time for schoolwork, which wasn't unusual for him as he often preferred being alone. But even before I heard his footsteps, I could feel something wasn't right. There was a strange tension hanging in the air, like the calm before something I couldn't quite name. I tried to shake it off by focusing on something simple, like preparing lunch, keeping my mind busy. But even then I couldn't ignore how distant Ethan had become, more withdrawn than usual. Although we had never been particularly close, there had always been this quiet understanding between us, an unspoken agreement to coexist peacefully. Yet over the past few weeks that balance had started to shift, replaced by something heavier, something harder to ignore. As I stood there finishing up, I heard him coming down the stairs, his footsteps slow and deliberate. When he appeared in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read, I felt that same uneasy knot tighten in my chest. He greeted me casually, asked what I was making. I answered just as casually, trying to keep everything normal, offering him some food, expecting him to nod and walk away like he usually did. But instead he stayed there, his presence lingering in a way that made the room feel smaller, more confined. I could feel his eyes on me as I moved around. A silent attention that made it hard to relax. So eventually I turned and asked if everything was okay, trying to sound light. But even I could hear the tension in my own voice. And he shrugged it off, giving a small smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. For a moment neither of us said anything, the silence stretching between us in a way that felt louder than words. Until he stepped closer. Unsure of what was happening or where this was going. When he spoke again, his voice quieter now, pointing out that it was just the two of us in the house. I felt my pulse quicken, despite myself, because there was something in the way he said it, something beneath the surface. I tried to brush it off, to keep things grounded, but the tension only grew, wrapping around us like an invisible weight. When he moved even closer, close enough that I could feel his presence, without looking at him, I finally stepped back, needing space, needing to breathe. But he didn't seem to notice, or maybe he chose not to, continuing instead with this strange, half-serious tone that made it impossible to tell what he really meant. I laughed nervously, asking what he was trying to say, hoping to diffuse whatever was building, but the look in his eyes told me that this wasn't just casual conversation anymore. It was something else entirely, something neither of us had prepared for, and that realization unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. So I grabbed the plates and carried them into the living room, using it as an excuse to create distance, though I could still feel his presence behind me, like a shadow I couldn't quite escape. When we sat down, keeping space between us on the couch, the silence returned, heavier than before, filled with everything we weren't saying. Then he asked a question that made my stomach drop, something about how things might be different under other circumstances. I didn't know how to respond, because I understood what he was hinting at even if he didn't say it directly. I tried to dismiss it, to keep things grounded in reality, reminding him of what we were, of the situation we were in. But he pushed back in his own way, not aggressively but persistently, as if he needed me to acknowledge something I wasn't ready to face. That's when I realized this wasn't just a passing moment of awkwardness. It was something deeper, something that had been building quietly beneath the surface for a long time. As much as I wanted to deny it, there were fragments of truth in what he was saying, small moments I had brushed aside before, feelings I had ignored because they didn't make sense, because they complicated everything. And now here they were, impossible to ignore, hanging between us in the silence. When I told him we couldn't go down that path, that it would only lead to problems, I could see the conflict in his expression. The same conflict I felt inside myself, because part of me wanted things to go back to how they were, simple and uncomplicated. But another part knew that something had already changed, that the line we had been careful not to cross had already been blurred, even if nothing had actually happened. Eventually he stepped back, apologizing quietly, saying he didn't mean to make things uncomfortable. I nodded, accepting it because I needed to. Because I wanted to believe we could just move past it. But the silence that followed felt different, heavier, filled with everything we were trying not to think about. As I returned to the kitchen, pretending to busy myself with dishes that didn't really need washing, my thoughts kept drifting back to what had just happened. To the way things had shifted so suddenly. I couldn't help wondering how we were supposed to act normal after this, how we were supposed to go back to pretending none of it existed. Even in the days that followed, that question lingered, shaping every interaction, every glance, turning even the smallest moments into something loaded with meaning. Until eventually we both settled into an unspoken agreement to move forward without addressing it again, maintaining a fragile sense of normalcy that felt more like avoidance than resolution. Though things appeared calm on the surface, there was always that underlying tension, a quiet reminder that some lines, once blurred, can never truly be restored to what they once were.